Taiwan is set to spend roughly 20 billion US dollars on its defense next year. That's the most in the country's history. But analysts from the US, the largest provider of military aid and weapon systems to Taiwan, says it needs to do more. By law, the US is obligated to help Taiwan boost its defense as it faces the threat of invasion from China. But whether the US would send its own troops to defend Taiwan is still a question. A new poll from conservative U.S. think tank Defense Priorities reveals that 37% of U.S. citizens think the U.S. should not come to Taiwan's aid in the event of a war. That's compared to 33% who are neutral, and 30% who say the U.S. should send troops, regardless of the consequences. The survey also shows that 66% of Americans think the U.S. should require Taiwan to invest more in its defense as a prerequisite for any commitment by the U.S. to defend the country. Most defense experts argue for Taiwan to develop an asymmetric strategy, using smaller and cheaper weapons, which they say is the best way to defend itself.
And if you only have all of your money spent on a couple of jets, a couple of ships, and some ground forces that aren't ready to really fight in the streets, then China's going to be able to take out Taiwan before the U.S. shows up. So the idea of asymmetry is if you're the weaker actor, buy large numbers of cheap things like drones and naval mines that are inexpensive and you can lose a lot of them and there'll still be enough of them to impose unacceptably high costs.
But Taiwan's defense ministry has traditionally focused on larger, more expensive systems like fighter jets and tanks, which take up a large portion of the country's budget. But since that budget is limited, it likely can't afford to have both.
It wants to have, shiny platforms as well as the asymmetric weapons. And so if you want to have all of it and you're not going to make difficult trade-offs, again, you're going to need to have a much larger budget. So you want to have it all, but the defense spending doesn't really allow you to have it all. And I think that's a lot of the, frustration or maybe bewilderment from some observers.
With the increase in military spending, Taiwan is now looking to invest more in drones and missiles, which could be cheaper and potentially be made in Taiwan. A recent purchase of about 1,000 drones from the U.S. shows that Taiwan is trying to break out of its traditional spending habits.
Again, I think it all comes back to where can Taiwan really get the most bang for its buck, whether it's indigenous or acquired from the U.S., and what things are mobile and lethal and can operate in degraded conditions.
Many observers agree that Taiwan's record defense spending is a step in the right direction. But given the threat Taiwan faces from China, there are still concerns there's more to do. Not only spending more, but spending smarter. Devin, Tsai, and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.